Welcome to another vintage fishing reel service and repair video. In this episode, we're going to be working on a Bronson Dart number 905. Tiny little reel, narrow little reel, and these were made by Bronson in Michigan sometime between 1960 and 1967. So not much else to say about it other than cool looking old well-made American made reel. So let's go ahead and get started. Start off by loosening the screws on the cover. There's some lake scum in there. Have to check and see if this drag assembly was put back on correctly. I've worked on some of these where they get put back together. Sometimes people take them apart, put them back together, and they don't end up the correct way, and so you can't always go with how they were when you find them. There's the pickup mechanism. And this on the spinner head. And let's see here. Looks like the spool is held in by the same screws that hold the cover on. And out comes the pinion gear. And again, as I indicated, it seems to be a really simple reel in terms of taking it apart. Not much to it. Take off the handle here. Looks like there were one washer and one lock washer on the handle. And let's see here. Looks like you have to take out this. You have to take out the thumb piece to get. Don't see how that comes out of there. I hate to torque on that too much for fear of breaking it, but this plate that holds the thumb button in is pressed on, and thus I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get that main gear out of there. I really would like to get that out of there and clean thoroughly down in that journal where that shaft goes, but I don't want to force this button and break it, and I'm not taking off that plate there that holds the button in because that's pressed in. So I guess what I'll do on this one is just try to run some WD-40 down in there and try to work any existing grease and oil out of there, and leave it at that. I can't see of any other way in which this apparatus is going to come out without monkeying around with the thumb button, and that would not be a good thing. So that's as simple as it is with regard to teardown. I'm going to put this, for now, I'm going to put this, well, maybe I will put that in the parts tray so I can more easily get the lubricant down in there. But that's all there really is to tear down on the Johnson 905 Dart. So I'm going to put all of this in the parts tray and take those over to the sink and thoroughly clean them. So I've gotten these all cleaned up. I took this, if you recall, that reel foot was quite rusty, so I took that out to the wire wheel. Got some lubricant down in the journal there where the main gear shaft goes, and hopefully got that cleaned out good. And as I was going through, this is one of the problems with buying things on online auctions. You know, you try to give people the benefit of the doubt and assume they didn't know, because a lot of them don't know anything about fishing reels, and they assume that it's working and say that it's working and that it's all there, and then you find out that it's not. And I almost never have that problem when I buy, you know, in hand, where I can examine the thing, even if I can't take it all the way apart. But I've been burned a much greater percentage of the time on online auctions. But this, I believe, should have a spring to hold that line pickup pin back when it's not engaged, and it doesn't. And so I'm going to have to see if I can find some way of rigging that so that that springs back when it's not engaged. And so I had another issue with a reel that couldn't be repaired. It's an old Shakespeare, and I took this isn't the exact same kind of spring I'm going to need, but I took the spring off of the anti-reverse lever, and it's springy wire. So I'm going to see if I can arrange that or bend that in such a way to work as a spring on the line pickup pin. Okay, that took me about 30 seconds. So I just kind of straightened it out, that wire, except for one loop that I put over this post here. There's space down in there between the top of this post and the pickup pin. And I got it in there relatively tight, and it's working. So I didn't even need a spring that was shaped the way I wanted it to. I just needed some of that good springy wire. And so I think that piece that I pulled off of that junk reel, that's why I keep those, is for, you never know when you're going to need a part even on a different brand reel. But that's springing now, so hopefully when I put that back together, it works properly. So let's do that. Let's get to putting this thing back together. First thing I want to do is lubricate the main gear shaft, and I'm just going to try to sneak some oil down in there, and then of course turning that around will help work it down. And I'm seeing some oil come out the other end, so, and I'm seeing, of course, drain off of this end. So I'm pretty confident that that's well oiled in there. And then I'm going to put a little oil on in this. There's an anti-reverse thing in there on a spring. You can see it. I think you can see it pop in and out. And so a little bit of lubricant in there. And then this thing, oddly, I couldn't find any grease in it whatsoever. So it was really dry. I'm just gonna take and make sure there is some really dried up grease I'm seeing coming deep down inside these teeth of this gear here. So I'm just going to run that around and try to scrape any of that out that didn't come out with the brush. There's definitely some, I don't think this reel has been serviced in a long time, if ever, because what little grease is left is just dried carbon pretty much down inside these teeth. But you can see all that dust there. That's all dried, bad dried grease. Okay, so now we can lubricate the main gear. And then a little bit of lubricant on this hinge for the thumb button. Okay, so now we should be able to begin to start putting our pinion gear in. Lubricate that with some oil, and that should go in like that. Work that around. Hopefully I didn't get out of the camera view right there, but I just put some oil on the pinion gear shaft and up underneath the pinion gear, and I'm working that into the spool. And because that's a pretty simple reel, there isn't much really left to do other than put this back in place, the spool back in place, and to screw that down. Not all the way, obviously, because the last bit of tightening on those screws tightens down the cover. Okay, and so now we've got our, and I'm going to do some touch-up work on this. I don't know what happened to this thing, but I mean, this has been rubbed on so badly. I don't know if this was bent and then somebody straightened it, but I mean, there's not just the paint off, but there's actually the metal is wore off in there. And then there's another place like that on the cover that I'm going to work on. So get this handle on. And then this screw has the first thing before the first washer is just a regular washer. Oh, almost lost it. Oh, there it is. Just a regular washer. And then the second one is a locking washer. So I'm just going to thread both of those. So the locking washer obviously is closest to the head of the screw. I'm just going to slide both of those over the screw, or at least that's the way I found it. I could not find a schematic for this reel that was accessible without a paywall, but that's the way I found it. And so I did find some discussion on a forum about where the drag washers go, and if that person is right, these drag washers were not reinstalled properly. We'll get to that in a minute. Put a little oil in this handle knob and try to work that down until it comes out the bottom. You can see it's that oil goes on clear, and then after you start working it in, it's definitely getting muddy. So definitely got some crud in there that you're working out as you do this and you oil this. And that's going to spin a lot more smoothly and make the reel work more smoothly and reduce the fatigue, so to speak. But it's working much more smoothly now. And it's starting to come out on the bottom of the knob, indicating that oil is thoroughly worked in there. And of course, doing that also, one of the main sources of squeaking in a reel is a poorly lubricated handle knob. So that helps reduce the squeaking as well as the operation. You see all that gray? That's all that gunk that's coming out of there as you work that oil in. So now we're ready to assemble the rest of the thing here. And it turns out that based on what I read online, that again, this was from a poster, somebody posting on a forum, so you hope they're right. But there are 2 metal washers and 1 fiber washer. And I'm assuming the thickest of the metal washers goes down first. Then you have, and both of the metal washers are keyed, but then you have a fiber washer and then a thinner metal washer. Now, if you remember when I tore this apart, the last 2 washers I just put on, the thin metal and the fiber washer, were on the outside of the cover, but gentleman online says they go on the inside. So that's the way I'm going to do it. It may not really matter. The main thing is that you have some drag on the spinner head, and then of course this has I think that's a built-in washer, but it's sort of cupped, and that goes on, and then the extent to which you tighten that down is your drag. So before I put that spring on, when I push the button in, that would not spring back. Now you can see it's springing back really nicely, and it's engaging really nicely when you wind. So that's popping back really nicely. And you saw there for a second that didn't spin right away when I started to turn it. That means that I don't have this tightened down enough. It's on the lowest, really low drag, and the spinner is that it's working, the drag's working. So if I tighten that down, obviously that doesn't happen. Now if I hold on to this, that'll give me some idea of the amount of drag I have. And so and these are really sensitive. The drags in these are really sensitive. So there's very little drag. So if I hold the spinner down, must have tightened up on its own there. Yeah. So there's very little drag if I'm holding the spinner, but it barely turns the thing. And then if you just tighten it a little bit, it's not a very good drag mechanism. I wonder, I'm going to try it the other way, the way I found it, and see if that works better. I'm going to try it with the other 2 drag washers on the outside. and see if that works better. May have been right the first time, we'll find out. Or it may work better that way, one of the two. So there's very little drag as I'm holding on to the spinner head. Tighten it down a little bit more, a little bit more. Actually, I like that a lot better. So I don't know which way is right. I don't know if the guy online is more right, or whether the way it was assembled was right, but I think that works much more smoothly and is less likely to cause the drag to tighten even more when the drag is engaged. I don't know what that rubbing sound is. I don't like rubbing sounds, even if they aren't really affecting the functioning much. Not hearing it there. It must be rubbing in there a little bit. I am going to oil that pickup pin. And I'm going to grease this area here. Yeah, that helps. Not grinding quite as bad as it was. Yeah, now it is. When you tighten it down, it's grinding a little bit more. And it's not really affecting the operation, it's just annoying. If I loosen that drag up, it doesn't happen. So there's a medium drag and it works fine. If I tighten it down, I still have drag. It's not like it was before where it seems to tighten up as the drag moves. So I'm going to live with the kind of the little rubbing sound in favor of having a drag that's actually functional. Alright, well, just when you think it's going to be a simple 10-minute service, you find all of these, almost always you find something that makes it a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to put this cover back on. Yeah, no, still has a bit of a grind, but this is a little bit loose. I could make a shim and put it down in there and tighten that up. But right now I want to get rid of these. Looks, it must have been that handle was bent because the scarring on the inside of that handle totally matches up with this here. So why anybody would have continued to use it and rub the metal like that and basically scar the metal without tightening that handle up first, I have no idea. But we're gonna, you know, if this was all completely toast, this cover, if it was in really bad shape, all scratched up and the paint was off, that would be a candidate for stripping it down and painting the whole thing black. But you know, if it's reasonably well, I like to keep some of the original character and just make spot repairs or paint job there just to cover up that and leave the rest original. So I'm going to do that on the inside of the handle and there. Okay, so the way I'm going to do this, you're always going to know that it's a touch-up because you're never going to get that perfectly blended and at the same level as the original paint. But that's okay because I really don't want to do a full repaint, strip down and repaint on this, because it's in reasonably good condition otherwise. I usually don't strip and repaint unless it's just really, really in bad shape. But I'm going to prep this surface by putting a little alcohol on there. And the method that I use is I actually use spray paint, but rather than spray it on or mask it off and try to spray it on, then you've got some kind of geometric border. I'm just going to try to feather it out by painting this on with a cheap paintbrush. So just spray it, and then you may have to do a couple coats because that first one doesn't want to stick very well. And then I'm going to let that first coat sort of start to dry and set up, and then add another one. Okay, that one's set up enough. I think we can go ahead and put our second coat on there. Okay, we'll let that dry. Okay, that paint has dried now, and so obviously from a distance looks a lot better. You don't have that gaudy silvery scratch in there, or whatever you want to call it, rash. I obviously didn't fix every little bit of boat rash on there, but the major one is gone. And of course, if you get that up in the light, you can see that it's a touch-up, but just generally improves the overall appearance of the reel without totally stripping it down and repainting and removing some of the original nature of the reel and its character. So there you have it, a Bronson Dart number 905, made between 1960 and 1967, serviced and repaired. Got that spring, and that was relatively painless. Fashioned a spring for the pickup pin, and she's good to go. Thanks for watching.